perceive their productivity gains to be higher than the reality. How do we make work better for the humans, not just the outcomes of the businesses? It's really important so that people get a little bit of understanding of one another, which makes them more likely to support each other when times are tough.
The impact that is possible by implementing shifts and behavior changes and then systems changes, it's like exponential. Welcome back to I Can Fit That In, the show where ambition meets alignment. Today, I am joined by Brian Elliott, CEO of Work Forward, bestselling author, and a leading voice on how work is evolving. Brian has spent over 30 years building and leading teams, from serving as a startup CEO to holding executive roles at Google and Slack. Today, Brian advises leaders on how to navigate hybrid work, redesign how teams operate, and make more effective evidence-based decisions about performance, culture, and flexibility in a rapidly changing workplace. We all know that's rapidly changing. I'm excited to explore what Brian is seeing currently and what leaders need to rethink about the future of work and how it continues to take shape in the world of AI. Brian, welcome to the show.
Great to be here with you, Erin. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Yeah. So, you have spent decades building teams at companies like Google and Slack, which are, no small feat. So when you look at how we work today, what feels most fundamentally different for you from your experience in the past versus what you know now?
Yeah. So if I go way back in terms of my own experience on this, a lot of this is I learned the hard way, the old culture eats strategy for breakfast, and how true that was, right? I was a consultant for the first roughly decade of my career and jumped out into tech startup land and really kind of got my butt kicked pretty steadily, because I assumed, having recruited consultants for a few years, that everybody was sort of going to operate the same, that we're going to end up with very similar sort of mindsets, skill sets, all the rest of it. And that turned out to be dramatically freaking wrong, like just horribly wrong. And it was in my startup days that I really learned how to build teams, build cohesion, build engagement, and how important that was, and how much more that mattered than having the right answers. I was fortunate. I had a people leader who basically took me aside one day and said, "You're kind of an asshole." And she was right. I was arrogant, right? I thought that having the right answer was the most important thing. I've been taught literally that your job is to be seldom wrong, but never in doubt, in ways that you explain yourself and sell what you're doing. And that really set me back a considerable amount. So I changed from there, learned, fortunately, through listening to other people. But that was a real challenge. I fast forward then, my time at Google, my time at Slack, I spent a lot of time building teams, building products, but also inheriting kind of broken messes sometimes. Finding ways to actually pull teams back together that were at least somewhat dysfunctional. So lots of lessons in those, now 27 years in tech.
Don't date yourself. No, just kidding.
That's true. So may as well.
Right. So, one of the things that I hear a lot about in my work is there's still a bit of a tension between flexibility and performance. And in your experience, what are you seeing with organizations that are trying to reconcile the two of those, and how are they going about doing so?
Yeah, and there's a lot of this that's actually positive, meaning there's a lot of firms that have actually made a pretty sizable shift where they sit there and say, "Hey, look, I know that I can't monitor you, and just because you happen to show up, know that you're doing great work. I need to actually find ways in which I'm actually figuring out, like, what are goals, what are outcomes, how do we manage people according to the results that they create." That actually does two things. It actually gives people a more level playing field to compete on. It helps them understand what the yardstick really is in the first place that they need to perform. And it also makes organizations better, bluntly. Because, look, if you're able to say to somebody, or more importantly to a team, "Here's the goal, here's the mission, I'm going to give you support in getting there, but I'm going to hold you accountable for doing it," you're giving people empowerment, right? That pulls on my internal intrinsic motivations. On the other hand, there's a lot of firms that are doing the opposite, especially driven by a CEO who bluntly doesn't trust people, who wants everybody back 5 days a week where he can monitor them. And people hear that too, right? If they've been performing really well and they've been coming in 2 or 3 days a week in the office, and the big boss says, "Come in 5," what they hear is, "You don't trust me." And that's not the way to motivate much of anybody. It makes
Right.
dealing with like the 5% underperformers, the people who might be cheating the system. The usual trick is, what's that say to the other 95%?
Absolutely. It kind of reminds me of in my years at CBRE, there was once this fairly controlling executive who started to say, I want everyone VP and under to show up to the 7 a.m. meeting every week, every Thursday.
Yeah.
And I mean, I had young kids at home and I was like, I'm not going to that meeting. Like
Yeah.
I just outright refuse to go.
Yeah.
And it was so funny because I didn't have to say it to that person, but like other people knew that I was like, I'm not going. And I'm like, what are
Yeah.
they going to do? Fire me? Like,
Yeah.
I dare you. This was not something that I needed to be at. It was just like literally a control thing. And I saw right through it. So I was just like, I'm not even going to ask for permission. I'm just going to keep doing my thing and having the autonomy I have. And if it becomes a problem, let's talk. And of course it didn't.
Yeah.
So that reminds me of that so much. So, one of the things in preparing for our chat that I was thinking through is this question around, are we really redesigning work or the future of work right now? Or are we just reacting to some of the changes that have come about in the past few years?
A lot of it is reacting, and you can sort of see it in the pattern of not only like the pandemic, post-pandemic ways of working, but AI also.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a really strong parallel, and here's one example of it. One of the parallels is, if I'm worried about flexibility and I'm worried that people aren't working hard enough from an office perspective, I start putting in place mandates. And I do the thing that you just described, right? Which is, I put in place something from the top that says, here's the rules, and we're going to judge you on how often you're in the office. That actually puts your boss in a bind as well as you. Because then if HR is reporting out, Erin's not coming in early enough or not showing up for the 7 a.m., is your boss really going to sit there and chastise you for doing that as long as you're delivering? Probably not.
Right.
But it's wasting a whole bunch of energy. AI is the same freaking thing. I'm seeing the same thing play out, which is, we're going to judge you and we're going to hold you to performance standard. Your performance management, at any rate, is going to include whether or not you're using AI tools in your AI tool usage.
Yeah.
We've never mandated a tool usage before, ever, or very seldom, right? You're monitoring and measuring activity again.
Mm-hmm.
There's a really great piece that just came out the other day. It was Duolingo. Their CEO is one of the folks that had said, like last year, hey, we're going to measure this. And he, at least as a CEO who was listening to his people, he got enough feedback consistently of people saying, hey, why are you measuring the activity? Shouldn't you care about what my results are? But they actually stripped it back out. He's backed away from it entirely.
Interesting. Yeah. Such a good point. We're told that AI is like to make us more productive, right? And I know I was actually, when I met you out in San Francisco, I was with Intuit a couple of days before that. And at dinner with my client, who were, two executives there, they were saying, yeah, it's making us productive per se, like in, just basically getting rid of things that are, things that we don't need to be focusing on, that it can do well and do fast. And so it frees up time, but it doesn't actually make us do more. It's just putting more on our plates in the long run. Because what's happening is that everyone thinks because they now have AI, they're going to be more productive, which means they can handle more projects.
Yeah.
So now that they just have way more initiatives that they have to have done, or I guess more deadlines for those initiatives. And then the work that AI is doing, it still has to be checked. They still have to look at every single detail. They can't just send that out. And we all know, we've seen repercussions happen where people do send those things out.
Yeah.
Don't put a post on LinkedIn, people, that has the prompt in it, right? But what's your response to that? That no, it's not necessarily just making you more productive. It's also adding to your plate.
Yeah, and there's a wide variety of experiences people have had with this. And I actually study this a lot and get into the research and talk with firms that are getting it wrong and right.
Yeah.
What you're describing is a couple of problems. One is AI work slop, right? Which is the term for, the person on a team or in a company that's quick to answer, but they didn't bother to read the answer that ChatGPT or Claude gave them. They're just passing it along. But they're doing that for a reason. They're often doing it because the boss is rewarding speed, right? So activity, again, looks really good.
Yeah.
There are places where people are getting some gains, but you're right. Even in some of the studies with engineers, it's often offset by people perceive their productivity gains to be higher than their reality if you put time studies on them. The perception is, because it writes code for me faster, I am faster. That often ignores the time to set up the prompt and the quality of the prompting up front, the QA on the back end, the testing that you have to do to make sure it's working, all the rest of that, plus the wait time on it. You add all that up and it's a lot less of an impact than you'd think. The bigger impact that I've seen with people is to stop focusing on the individual level and start focusing on teams. I brought together 4 different companies to talk about what are they seeing in the space. Atlassian, Upwork, Udemy, and Zapier, they're all tech companies, but so they all should be somewhat decent at this. They're all struggling to some degree or another with finding impact, meaning it's not about does Erin use it, does Brian use it, is it making a difference in the business? And all of 4 of them, without comparing notes ahead of time, came to the same conclusion, which is if we get one AI champion into a team who's willing to share what they're learning with other people and who's willing to spend some time automating the kind of lousy crud that sits inside of any team, that's what gets us actual gains. That's what helps move work forward faster, not the individual stuff. But that only works if we're rewarding at the team level. Right? If that champion perceives that I will be rewarded if our team does better, then I'm going to invest the time and energy at the team level, as opposed to there's a bunch of companies you and I both know that are rewarding individual performance, like how many lines of code is a developer writing. If that's the case, they're not going to share. They're going to hide what they're doing.
Right. So there goes my employee of the month for answering the most phone calls in my first job out of college.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hey, that one probably was unfortunately appropriate. Like, okay, how many?
Oh, that was classic back then. My gosh. Oh, $30,000 a year.
Those answering the phone and then giving them, bad answers and hanging up quickly to take the next phone call.
Right. At least I had the right answers.
There you go. Exactly.
Too good. So in your experience with teams, and I guess, we were focused on AI and you kind of brought it to this team level. So on that team level, when teams are not working well, taking AI out of the picture, but when teams are not working well, how often is it actually a systems thing versus a people thing?
Almost always. Look, the starting point with any given team is, are you even aligned on goals? So I've done this, you've done this, any given, especially cross-functional project, you walk into the room and we just start trying to do the work. We start trying to work forward on it. And sometimes a month or 2 down the road, you start getting in these conflicts, and the conflicts might be interpersonal, but I'm willing to bet more times than not, it's because you didn't have to do the hard work up front of saying, what are the actual goals of this project? Are we aligned on how this project is going to help us from a functional perspective, right? And I've actually done this exercise, and I've done it with some other peers too, where you pull people up front. I actually wrote about a case study on this recently. 3 teams coming together and trying to work on a project. Only 32% of people in the project could even name what the goals of the project were. It's even less than that agreement that those are the right goals. So if you're starting there, you kind of have a problem from the get-go.
Yeah, that's so interesting. This is why I love your work and my work together. Like, it's so complementary because so much of what I do, I'm not looking at the systems and I'm not looking at, you have the wrong person in the wrong role, right? I mean, that does exist and we can easily see those things. But what I'm looking at is how are you actually operating on a daily basis, and not on a one-to-one level, but looking at the whole team. And it starts with the self, because then the self-awareness then leads to the team awareness, then the company awareness. And so it's so complementary, and being able to see here's what's going on with the systems and here's what's going on with the people, and then the impact that is possible by implementing shifts and behavior changes and then systems changes. It's like exponential. So very, very exciting stuff. Now,
one thought on that. I actually had this conversation with somebody earlier today. They were asking me about coaching. And I was describing I didn't do this early on in my career, but later on, I got really saw the huge benefits of getting people to understand each other more deeply when you're starting something up as a team. And that doesn't have to be, the super intrusive psychological profiling stuff, but it can be. But even starting off with the basics of I'm a night person versus a morning person, introversion, extroversion. How do you like to consume information, written versus verbal? Are you detail oriented or big picture? Just some of those basic building blocks of fundamentals can be really valuable in helping you and I and everybody else know how we operate and not mistake some way in which you react as being a problem that I created as opposed to something that's just in the nature of how we both interact.
Yeah, I mean, that is so true. And you don't have to do it with a personality assessment. There's other ways to get there, right?
Yeah,
And honestly, like much more human ways that could be a lot more fun and
yeah,
engaging when you're doing that work. So I
yeah.
love that. So you have seen leadership at scale, obviously, and your experience both inside corporations and outside. But what is one behavior, or I would say like one mindset that consistently separates really effective leaders from the rest of the pack?
Curiosity.
Mm.
I've seen this again and again. There is, especially these days, it feels like the leader who knows everything. This kind of goes back to my problem when I started my career, which is the know-it-all leader who may have been trained that way to be expected to have all the answers. And that might work in certain circumstances, works if they're sort of right. But what it does is it tells the team to shut off their own brains. The leader who instead says, hey, look, I've got big vision and like huge aspirations for what I want us to do, but I'm smart enough to know that I'm not smart enough to have all the answers. That I'm curious about how you all think we might get there. What approaches might we take? What ideas do other people have about how we're actually going to take that mountain? That type of approach shows a little bit of empathy, but also just shows like, hey, I'd like us to work on this together, and drives a heck of a lot more engagement than the sort of I know it all perspective.
Right. And discretionary effort too. I'm sure
Oh
people are
gosh.
much more willing to work harder for someone that
Yeah.
doesn't just act like they know everything, but actually says like, hey, we're in this together and we're going to figure this out. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I know that's where I'm going to throw my chips every time.
Absolutely.
So, and I mean, it's a really good point. I'm actually curious. How do you personally manage your time, your attention, your energy in your work? Because you and I were just chatting, before this recording about the amount of travel and, intensity of just life as a whole, not just work. So what are some of the things that you really do, some of the rituals, the non-negotiables in your life that keep you centered?
I manage my time poorly. No, there
So
are
that's
some.
not one of them.
Exactly. No, there are some boundaries, and the boundaries have gotten a lot better over time. They used to be really, really, really horrible in a lot of different ways. Look, relationships and my own health come first, right? So, getting a good night's sleep, getting exercise, time with my spouse, time with the kids. My kids are young adults.
Yeah.
That's all really important to me. Time with friends. I've also changed what I do these days. I am a advisor. I work with Charter. I work with BCG, but my time's kind of my own more than it used to be. And so, like my next 3 weekends, I've got 3 to 4 day weekends that are time with friends, time with family, time away. The other days are wicked intense. I was up and I had a phone call at 5 a.m. Pacific time here this morning. Thank God I'll wrap in another hour or two and put some boundaries around it. But I also know where my limits are, right? Gotten better at monitoring how am I doing in terms of not just like literally physical health, but where's my energy level? Um, and a big part of that for me is finding what brings me joy in work. What do I like digging into? And for me, a lot of that is learning and connecting people and helping people with the challenges they're facing. So
Right.
those things are where I'll gravitate towards all day long.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that you started that out with, you're not managing time. What you're really doing is looking at your energy, and that your
Yeah.
health and your relationships come first. And, for so long, we did live in this world where we were kind of told, put yourself last. Right. And
Yeah.
then, of course, you see relationships suffer because then, the person puts themselves last and no one gets the best of them. So
That's right.
I'm so glad that we're moving on from that way of being that did not serve anybody. It was a lose-lose situation for everyone. So
I
putting
hope.
yourself first does not mean putting others last.
Yeah, exactly. And I hope we are. There's a bit of the resurgence of the hustle culture stuff. Look, I'm in tech. I'm in the Bay Area.
The
Hustle
bro
culture is
culture,
everywhere.
Brian.
Oh Lord, it really is crazy. It's sort of in the water here, and it rises and falls episodically, of course.
Yeah.
But there is a reality of this, which is people aren't giving their best past a certain number of hours. There was actually an early stage Google engineering leader that I knew pretty well, and he's written about this a bit too, and said, look, after 4 hours, your brain sort of turns to mush.
Yeah.
You just can't stay focused on the problem at hand. Maybe if you take a break for an hour and then come back, you got a couple more hours of good cognitive processing or something like that. But anybody who's stretching beyond that is at risk of burnout. And God forbid, especially out here these days, if you're supplementing that, not just with caffeine, but Adderall and other stuff like that, it's going to lead to problems sooner rather than later.
Yeah, that's a lost cause for
It
sure.
is.
And it's funny too, because I know in my own, day-to-day work, on days that I have a lot of meetings and I'm online staring at the computer a lot, and then I switch to some focused work on the computer, I will find myself, after several hours of sitting here, I will find myself starting to like check email more often, like
Yeah.
to start to do really stupid things that I don't normally do
Yeah.
because my brain is just not firing on all cylinders. Like you just said, it's like I don't have the capacity any longer to
That's right.
continue to give to the screen. So it's like, just go take a break, go take a walk, get some water, have a conversation with like your spouse or a friend or a client or whatever, but just do something different and not in front of the computer.
You have to. That, by the way, AI is making all that stuff worse and harder because there's a friend of mine, Gabriella Kellerman, put out a piece in HBR called AI Brain Fry. It was her and some BCG colleagues that did a study of several thousand workers. And what they found, and I've heard this from a lot of software developers, the problem is AI is there all the time and it's asking you hard questions. So you have to think harder about it, right? And so the cognitive load, it's not just like emotional burnout. It's literally like my ability to process as much as you're asking me to process starts hitting tilt. And anybody who's saying, oh, I can manage 10 AI agents simultaneously, it's kind of BS.
Yeah.
Their ability to do it with any quality is highly questionable and it's going to cause problems.
Right. So I am, last thing on the AI, I know it because I'm not very good at this stuff yet, but I'm working on it. There is something called Duckbill that is essentially, it's an agent, right? And it's like an assistant for your life. So
Yeah.
I am going to have some new information pretty soon on whether or not I'm really bought into this stuff, because I have this thing scheduling an appointment for me to not only renew my license, but to turn it into a real ID. And I need a DMV appointment and I just don't want to deal with it. So it has all my information and it told me there's no appointments available for April. So on May 1st, it put an invite in my calendar and it's going to start trying to book the meeting for a morning in May. I will let you know if it happens.
Fingers crossed for you.
Fingers crossed.
See if this thing can actually give you an assistant that actually is an assistant.
Right. So when you think about the future of work, Brian, what gives you the most optimism about it?
I think what we're seeing is that if you take the long haul view of this, increasingly people are doing work that is deeper, more complex, more relationship driven, that is more creative in work, right? So automation is challenging because automation takes out the lowest level work in anything, but that's also the most repetitive, stress, boring, administrative aspects of work in the first place. And so that's actually good if we can get that part out of it. I think we're also getting more understanding of how to make it more human, about the importance of connection with other people and understanding each other. I think we sometimes forget those lessons and then it comes back to us. But I'm actually really hopeful because there are a lot of us who are actually focused on this issue of how do we make work better for, the humans, not just the outcomes of the businesses.
Absolutely. I mean, hence a lot of the themes of my book of focus and presence and clarity and, capacity. It's like, these are things that have to do with the human, we're all in business. Businesses are made of people. Right. Yeah. Doesn't mean that AI is not a major part of it, but it means that people also ultimately have to run it and make the decisions. Right. So at least for a while, I mean, who knows? Who knows what the next decade holds? I never thought we'd be where we are now. So
no, and things continue to change and morph, but at the same time, the essence remains that the human creativity, the human connection part is the most valuable aspects of what we do.
100%. And if someone is leading a team right now, through all the uncertainty and, all the things that are going on in this very, sort of demanding and relentless world that we live in, if they really want to improve how their team operates, what is one maybe simple change or one thing they can do that will, move the needle a little bit?
I think part of it is just showing empathy. I think that we're on year 3 of year of efficiency, do more with less, all the rest of it. and everybody at every level feels that pressure. Literally, CEOs feel it too. There was a study I read about 74% of CEOs say that they're afraid they'll lose their job if they don't, show real results with AI by 2027. Just like, that's crazy. So if the top down is applying that kind of pressure, you got to create some space within your team to say, hey, look, we know it's hard. We know it's challenging right now. Let's find ways for us here to support one another and to give each other a break. And that requires taking a pause every once in a while. I'll give you a super concrete example. Instead of on the weekly team meeting diving into what's the agenda and where are we in X, Y, and Z projects, start off with an icebreaker.
Yeah.
Get back to good old human, like, how are you? How was the weekend? What's your, what have you seen recently that you like? My favorite all-time icebreaker question: where do you stand on pumpkin spice latte? You'll get a conversation going on questions like that. I hate it. I love it. Here's why not. But just finding ways to rekindle human connection, even on teams that are distributed and virtual, like you and I are today, is really important so that people get a little bit of understanding of one another, which makes them more likely to support each other when times are tough.
That's so good. One of the ones that I've used with virtual teams is to just spend, 30 seconds saying what weather pattern you might be right now. And cool. So it's interesting because some people are like, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm like a tornado or a tsunami or what have you. And other people are like, I'm sunny with a slight chance of rain. And it just gives you a little insight into like where that person might be on that given day. And then by the way, it's like, depending on how attentive you are and maybe how much time you can allocate later that day, you might go to that person who feels like a tsunami and be like, Can I help?
Exactly. Where do you need help? How can I give you a break? What's going on? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
It's really opening up that conversation.
Yes. Now, Brian, you have both a Substack newsletter, right? And then also a membership for Charter Forum. So can you talk to us a little bit about those things?
Yeah. So I have my own Substack. You can find everything about me on LinkedIn, including a link to the Substack. I write for Charter. Charter is a future of work media company. I actually just put out a piece today on elder care, which is a topic near and dear to my heart that's hitting a lot of people in the workforce these days. And then I also run a group called Charter Forum. Charter Forum is a sort of a invite-only senior leadership forum aimed mainly at chief people officers and senior members of their team. But it's really an opportunity for people to come together, Chatham House rules, and talk about the challenges that they're facing.
Love it. So great. And then, I'm actually curious as well, if you were to consider how you've defined success throughout your career and how that has shifted, not necessarily since AI, let's kind of leave that to the side for a little bit, but just how has that shifted or evolved throughout your career? And maybe like, what are some of the main reasons why you've noticed it evolving?
Yeah. So I was fairly driven would be a way to say it. So startup CEO, you don't start to be a startup CEO unless you really want to be successful and drive, business results and sort of ring the bell. I did that a couple of times. I did okay, not great. I went to Google, took on bigger and bigger problems, bigger and bigger teams, went to Slack, sort of did the same trajectory again. And somewhere along that path, I realized that wasn't really the most important set of things in life.
Yeah.
My family, my kids, my health, my welfare, my relationships that sometimes faltered were as or more important, and finally kind of grew up a little bit on that front. For me, from a career standpoint, for the past, I'd say, decade, really, it's been impact. What's the impact I'm able to have on people around me, the teams that I work with, and especially the last 6 to 7 years, as I've done more that's sort of advisory work and writing and speaking, it's how can I help other people make work better for their own teams? How can I take both what I learned, research, case studies, and kind of arm people who probably already have a predisposition towards, can we please do better here with the tools and a little bit of inspiration to do it.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so important, like you said, like it's the people who kind of want to do better, right? Because you can lead a horse to water, but not make it drink it,
That's
so
right.
I'm with you on that one. What would you leave my listeners with when it comes to building this new way of working that feels more sustainable and allows high performance to be something that is a part of life, but not the only thing that means success and keeps us from burning out, honestly. So what is it that you would leave them with that they can take away and, gosh, I can do this sustainability thing. I can be a high performer long term and it's going
Yeah.
to be okay.
I think the thing that I would say is you're not alone. And the
Mhm.
reason I'd say that is it works kind of on a couple of dimensions. One is there are a community of people around you. There are people like Erin. There are people like me. There are other people out there that are trying to help people support finding ways of working that are sustainable, but also understanding that if you are working in a way that's sustainable, it's actually better for your company also, right? Having you be present, having you be focused, having you have the sort of peace of mind enables you to do your best work. The other is you are not alone means you and your team, whether that's you and your peers within the organization or you and a team that you manage. That's actually the most important unit that has to work well together to get anything meaningful accomplished. And so if you take that and say, look, how do we as a team operate better together? That also is more sustainable because then you'll find ways to support one another and to get through the rougher times together. So for me, that's a big part of the lens is it's kind of against this hustle culture and individualistic side of things, which leads to burnout, which leads most people down a pretty negative path to how do we help support one another in ways that are real, that also happen to be better long-term for business outcomes.
Yes. And then obviously the impact grows from there. So
Yeah,
right
exactly.
back home to your message. I have had such a great time chatting with you, Brian. I'm very grateful for our connection.
Me too.
You're a kindred spirit for sure. And I know that there's so much ahead for us. So I'm really excited about our connection.
Me too. Erin, thanks so much for having this conversation with me.
Yes. Well, thank you for being here. And everyone, there will be in the show notes everywhere that you can find Brian and his excellent work. So stay tuned for that. And also, if you are here, please like, share, subscribe, and or share the show out with others because reaching the masses is not easy. But when you do that, it helps get it to more and more people who need to hear it. Until then, be well.